All right, my man. So we're going to dive into those acceleration mechanics and then those top speed mechanics to get that 60 time down, run fast through 60s, and to steal more bases and be more efficient on the base path. So first thing we're going to start with is that start position. I think the start position is good. You're low to the ground. You're strong. You're balanced. The only things I can kind of critique are your feet, right? So one thing I like to do is get that back foot kind of rotated up on my toe. You can see that your back foot is very square to your body. And one thing that allows me to do is kind of take out that step of rotating that back foot so that I can fire off of it. And it's something that I can do before I start moving forward as opposed to after, the pitcher lifts his leg or, you start running your 60, right? So it's just one less movement that we can take out of that out of that acceleration phase, so that we can, be more efficient and cut down time on that 60 and stealing bases. The same concept applies for the front foot, right? So again, your front foot is pretty open here, but I'd like to see you even test that a little bit more. Try and get that front foot pointed towards, like the back of the pitcher's mound. And what that allows me to do is kind of open up my hips a little bit more, again, so that I can take out one less movement I have to do once I start, moving towards my destination, right? So other than that, I think everything looks good. The thing that I really want to focus on here is your acceleration and that drop step and that first step, right? So I think something that would help is to kind of keep your hands kind of in between your body. I see your back hand or your back arm is kind of outside your body here. And one thing that really allows me to do is focus on firing that back shoulder, that back elbow, and tucking it once I start running forward. So I'll kind of show you what I mean here. So once we start moving forward, if you look at my start video, I like to tuck that back elbow, and it allows me to throw that back elbow back and get everything moving, right? So that's the first thing that I like to fire is that back elbow, right? And you do the same thing, right? That back elbow gets thrown backwards, but it's not as quick. It's not as forceful because that back elbow is already behind your body. So really think about keeping those your right shoulder and your right elbow in between your knees and then firing it backwards once we start moving forward. So I think that also will kind of play into what I'm about to talk about here. So with your drop step, I think it looks really good. You're creating that good shin angle, propelling yourself forward, but you're not really extending off that back leg as powerfully as you can, right? So it looks like you're almost rotating and then pushing off. So if we look at the rotation and how much extension you gain during that rotation phase, and then once you're rotated, you push off that back leg. I'd like to see those happen kind of at the same time. Think about pushing yourself off with your back leg and also rotating your hips, right? So I think throwing that back elbow back is really going to help with the rotation to happen naturally, and then you can really focus on firing off that back leg, right? So again, once we fire off that back leg, what happens simultaneously is that we're rotating our hips and we're getting that drop step going so we can get ourselves into a good position to get into that triple extension, right? So another thing with the drop step that we're looking for is once we start pushing off with that foot, we're looking to get that, that point where our foot is touching the ground or our, foot to ground contact point. We want that to be in front of our center of gravity, right? So if we look at my center of gravity is up here and my foot to ground contact point is back here. What that allows me to do is push myself forward as opposed to pulling myself forward. So when I can push myself forward and get my knee out that far in front of my my foot, I'm able to really push myself forward. And we can see here that that box for you is a little bit skinnier, right? And that has a lot to do with that forward lean that occurs when we are in that rotation and acceleration and drop step phase, right? When we're really pushing off with our back foot, we're able to get that forward lean that allows us to push off with our front foot. So What it really comes down to is the extension that you get off your back leg, right? So being able to get that forward lean, like I've talked about, being able to get that good foot to ground contact point where we want it with our center of gravity, really comes from this extension with our back hip, right? So you're getting that solid extension with your knee. But what I really want you to focus on is getting that hip extension, right? Even if we look right here and compare it to where I get, is that, I have this extension through my hip, right? There's that straight line, or getting close to that straight line through my hip, up through my shoulders, right? But for you, we see that, extension here, but then there's not really that same extension at the hip. So really focus on throwing your hips forward and getting that good extension with your very first step off your back leg, right? And we can even see it more if we play it forward, right? In your next step, you get that same extension here with your knee and your ankle, but again, that rounded back that we're seeing here, let's see if I can get this right. The rounded back, right, is really taken away from that extension and that power and that force production that you're creating, with your leg. So try to get into that solid, triple extension position where we're getting our legs, shins, hips, and shoulders in one straight line. Think about throwing your hips forward. The wall drills will be great for that, leaning up against the wall and really focusing on that good solid posture and acceleration, right? Our different high knee drills will help with that as well. But really focusing on getting that extension through the hips. Broad jumps, vertical jumps, all that stuff is great for working on all that stuff. And then the last thing I want to talk about is really focusing on getting your knees and your ankles and your feet to move in one solid straight line, right? So if we look right here, we can kind of see the knee and the ankle and the front of your foot start to fade outward a little bit. And you see how your foot kind of hits the ground at an open stance, right? It's kind of pointed at a 45-degree angle right here. Let's see if I can show you right. Kind of pointed out that way. We really want to keep everything in that straight line. We want to keep everything moving in a straight line, moving in this direction. So really focus on bringing your knees straight up to your chest and then driving straight into the ground while bringing your other knee straight up to your chest, right? So this is good with your left leg straight up to your chest, but you see how you're kind of pushing off, and I can see the bottom of your spikes because you kind of create that open angle with your foot. So really focus on trying to keep everything in a straight line, and then we're going to dive into your top speed mechanics coming up. Right. The number one thing I want you to focus on when you're doing these sprint drills, when you're running your 60s and stealing bases, is trying to keep everything square to your target or your destination, right? So we kind of focus on a little bit in your acceleration phase, right? We saw that the knee kind of faded out, the ankle, the toes kind of faded outward, and here we can see it really in the toes and in your shoulders, right? So if we look right here, we can see that, from this angle, I can see, the front of your shirt, and as you start to run and your shoulders start to sway, I can now see the back of your shirt, and then even as you pass the camera, I can still start to see the front of your shirt again. And what that tells me is that there's a sway in your shoulders, right? Not everything is in a straight line. So focus on keeping your shoulders and even your arms. See how your arm kind of swings across your body there? What we really want is that your arms swing straight back and forth, your shoulders stay square to your target, and you're being very particular and very focused in each movement that you have. Every movement that we make when we sprint is either helping us get to our destination or it's holding us back, right? And in this case, that sway in your shoulders is kind of holding you back. So really focus on staying squared to your target, keeping those elbows moving straight in line with your body. And I think that'll help you use your energy and your movement more efficiently and get you from point A to point B in a quicker period of time, right? All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is what's called knee flexion. And basically if we're going to look at the sprint mechanics of these runners down on the bottom, right? The guy on the left is a professional sprinter, and his technique and his movement patterns are the things that we're going to try and emulate, right? And really, what we're going to talk about is flexion in our knee and in our hip, and how that leads to the proper, what I call stride cycle, or basically, the movement or the pattern in which our legs move, right? Because all sprinting is at top speed is just moving one leg in front of another as quickly and as efficiently as possible, right? So if we're going to do that, we're going to have to look at the best sprinters and to see how they do it, right? So the guy on the left, right, we're going to see that once his back foot leaves the ground, right, we're going to see that he puts a huge emphasis on driving his front knee up and forward, right? So if we look at him, driving that knee forward, right? If you compare his stride cycle to the guy on the right, the guy on the right, his first movement once he gets that foot off the ground is to come up and backwards, right? That toe comes off the ground and comes up and backwards and to the butt, right? And then after that, the knee comes up. The guy on the left, his foot comes off the ground and it's led by his knee driving up and forward, right? So it comes off the ground and it comes up and forward, right? Up and forward. The knee drives forward as opposed to the heel. If we look at the guy on the right, the heel comes to the butt, and then we see that movement forward with the knee, right? So we'll play it through just so you can see what I'm talking about, right? See how much earlier the guy on the left clears that knee and gets into that solid flexion position, right? So flexion is really created by the tall posture that we're seeing here. He's perpendicular with the ground with his torso. He gets that knee up. He gets the solid flexion in the knee, and he keeps that front, that toe flexed and upward, right? That's the kind of posture that we're looking for once we get to top speed, right? A lot of people who, don't train as sprinters, they don't train as, track runners, they create, somewhat of a forward lean, right? Their knee kind of lags their heel, and what I mean by that is if we come back to this position, right, the heel comes up, and after the heel comes up, it's almost like they're doing butt kickers, right? Doing a butt kicker, and then the knee comes up, right? And then now the leg is trying, and the toe, is trying to catch up to get up here, so then it can then drive backward, right? As opposed to getting that toe and that foot up in the first place, right? So that it can drive down into the ground and backwards, right? That's the difference that we're looking for when we're sprinting at a high level and we're sprinting at full speed, right? We're looking to get that knee and that foot cleared and in front of us so that we can push it down and push it backwards, right? It's like we're stomping into the ground, right? If we're stomping into the ground, we don't want to create, this sort of angle if we're trying to stomp into the ground as hard as we can. If we want to stomp in the ground as hard as we can, we want our body to look like that, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're trying to, create that force and get our feet to be on the ground for as short a period as possible, and creating this sort of body posture is how we do that, right? So when we look at your video, right, we see that the knee clears just as you're getting to the butt, and that's good. You're getting into a solid position, but I think we can do a little bit better. So what I really want you to do is focus on, once you get this back foot off the ground, I want to see a real focus on driving that knee forward, right? That should be the focus. Once you get to top speed, there is no getting faster. We can't be trying to accelerate once we get to top speed, because that's what top speed is. It's as fast as we can go. So once we get to top speed, it's all about maintaining that speed and getting on and off the ground as quickly as possible, getting that stride cycle to be as quick as possible, trying to gain as much ground as quick as possible. And the way that we do that is by getting this back foot off the ground and really having a focus on driving that knee up and forward, right? So I really want to see that from you. A lot of the drills that we do in the program will be great for that. The high knee drills, especially the wall drills that we use at Acceleration, the high knee drills are going to be great for that and implementing it at top speed. So I hope everything made sense. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help in any way possible after this. So let me know what you think, and I hope you enjoyed.